Good morning, my name is Josh from CyclonesOZ and welcome to your detailed forecast update for the 11th of December 2024. We have a lot to get through once again today, starting things off over in the southeast of Queensland with some heavy rainfall that's been materialising over the past 24 hours with a little bit more on the way. We're also going to talk about some very heavy rainfall to locally intense rainfall across central parts of Queensland between Mackay right down to Rockhampton. We'll talk about the rainfall up in far north Queensland with plenty of the stuff on the way up there. We'll talk about the tropical lows offshore from Western Australia and also the heatwave that's still ongoing across the southwest corner of Western Australia. All of that plus more coming up in today's weather forecast. If you are brand new to the channel, please consider subscribing, but let's get stuck straight into things today over in the southeast of Queensland. So overnight rainfall accumulations have been slightly higher than expected. In fact, around the Brisbane area they've been about twice what the expected was, with Brisbane, the metro area at least, picking up 73 millimetres and plenty of the suburbs surrounding it picking up between 70 and 80 millimetres. More rainfall is on the way, and you can see over the past 12 hours it's just been a steady band of this light to moderate stuff streaming through here. The rainfall is easing off. The Bureau of Meteorology only expecting another couple of millimetres to come through into the Brisbane area, and you can see it on the forecast here. Yes, there is still some stuff happening around the Brisbane area, and especially towards the north, up towards Maroochydore. A couple of thunderstorms up there as well, but the rainfall will be clearing out throughout the course of today, and surprisingly enough, no real thunderstorms expected to blow up this afternoon either, so it looks like the rainfall will be pretty much clearing out of the Brisbane area in the southeast corner of Queensland area for good for at least the remainder of this week. You can see a couple of showers and storms expected to continue into the later parts of this week around sort of Friday and Saturday time, but by then the rainfall that we're going to be talking about here is pretty much completely gone. There's no real thunderstorm outbreaks or no real rainfall events on the forecast for at least the next week or so, at least in the southwest of Queensland. In fact, over the next 14 days it's looking pretty high and dry as well. But yeah, plenty of rainfall has fallen. Accumulations have been widespread between 25 and 50 millimetres, with, like I said, some of those accumulations between 30 and 70 millimetres around the Brisbane metro area, topping out at 73 millimetres in the Brisbane metropolitan area. So the rainfall has been very good indeed. And like I said, the rainfall now clearing out. You can see 10-day rainfall accumulations into the southeast of Queensland, not looking too flash over the next 14 days. It's going to be a dry run up to Christmas, and I will be able to give you a Christmas forecast pretty soon for the southeast of Queensland as well, especially if this dry weather makes the forecast nice and simple. But yeah, there's nothing to talk about in southeastern Queensland, so let's get out of it and move up into the central regions. And I'm not going to include Townsville either in the central Queensland forecast, but we have a lot of rainfall on the forecast now, and you can see it here on this forecast. Over the 14 days, rainfall accumulations looking very healthy, so let's see what's going to be driving that. So this afternoon and evening we're going to be seeing a low pressure system and a low pressure trough developing and extending across central and northern parts of Queensland, extending from the border of the Queensland and the Northern Territory and Borroloola on the Gulf of Carpentaria coastline right through Queensland. You can see this trough here tying up to the low pressure system that's brought all of that rainfall to the southeast of Queensland. So it's a Queensland-wide thunderstorm outbreak expected. You can see thunderstorms expected to extend right from the northwest and down into the central coast. Now these thunderstorms here will be their most intense around Huendon and Forsyth. These thunderstorms here certainly could pack a punch in terms of heavy rainfall, damaging winds, and maybe the isolated threat of large hailstones as well. The thing with these thunderstorms is, to me, they look slow moving enough to kind of just be kind of a heavy rainfall threat. Yes, they will be moving in kind of the northeasterly direction, or moving from the southwest to the northeast, but these thunderstorms here, they don't really look like they're going to be too fast moving, which is why I've highlighted these as definitely being a heavy rainfall threat. These thunderstorms will also fire up around the Moranbah and Claremont area into the central coastline region of Queensland, but they're not expected to be too powerful there. A couple of severe ones are possible, but they're not going to be too strong, like I just said, and certainly not threatening to some of the more coastal communities. The showers beginning to pipe up for Agnes Water, Gladstone and Bundaberg as well from about now, and in fact you can see it on the radar imagery, a couple of showers already starting to materialise in that area here, and it looks like the rainfall there is about to pipe up, which is great news for them, especially around Gladstone and Agnes Water. They do desperately need the rainfall. I don't think they're going to get a whole lot today, just a couple of millimetres, but the real rainfall will pipe up from tomorrow from this low pressure system here that's expected to develop just offshore from the Queensland coastline. This low pressure system is going to conveniently get itself tucked into the Wide Bay area, and as such really drive a lot of rainfall ashore for locations between Mackay and Rockhampton, specifically between Ogmore and Rockhampton. Actually, the rainfall is going to be concentrated in this little peninsula here in the Burnett region, north of Yeppoon and just outside of Ogmore. Now the rainfall is also going to be quite heavy around Clairview, Serena and St. Lawrence. The rainfall there will be quite intense at times, and the rainfall, especially along the coastline, that's where it's expected to be at its heaviest. You can see the rainfall continuing through tomorrow morning and slowly easing off throughout the course of tomorrow, and you can see it does continue into Friday, in fact piping up again to Friday morning around the Mackay area. This rainfall here is going to be kind of long-lived at times, and like I said, quite heavy as well. The convective forecast models really favouring quite a lot of rainfall as well into this area of Queensland. You can see the Access North Queensland model here calling for quite a lot of rainfall from thunderstorms thunderstorms into the late evening of tonight. There'd be kind of a bit of a squall line, a high precipitation squall line moving through, and then that rainfall just kind of getting stagnated tomorrow morning around this kind of central to North Queensland sort of area, along the border of where you'd classify central and North Queensland around the Mackay area, and then extending down towards Ogmore and Clairview. I think this is a bit more of an unreliable depiction of where this rainfall is going to be located, but in terms of how it's going to happen, I think this is a pretty reliable depiction of it here. It's going to be this forecast here, located a little bit further to the south around the Ogmore area, just wherever this low pressure gets itself jammed up against along the coastline, and I wouldn't be surprised if 6-hourly rainfall accumulations were around that 100mm mark. Rainfall easing off slightly Thursday evening before it pipes up again Friday night, just a little bit further on to the north. You can see Thursday night into Friday night, you can see the rainfall piping up again around the Mackay area, and then especially further north up towards Ayr and Bowen, the rainfall looks like it's going to be quite heavy there on the early hours of Friday and into Friday afternoon. The rainfall will again ease off by Friday evening, still though plenty of showers and thunderstorms to go around into early Saturday morning, and then it looks like finally the rainfall begins to clear out by Saturday afternoon after a nice round of thunderstorms on Saturday, kind of in the mid-morning to the afternoon. Still though, a couple of showers expected to continue right throughout the course of this weekend, and the rainfall doesn't actually look like it's going to pipe down at all for a good couple of days after, but the real heavy stuff is going to be coming through tomorrow morning, Friday morning, and then into Friday afternoon and early Saturday morning into the mid-morning hours of Saturday. Plenty of rainfall is expected. I would be surprised if accumulations didn't exceed 70 or 80mm, at least in some area north of Rockhampton and outside of Ogmore, but to the 9 a.m. on tomorrow morning. There's going to be plenty of rainfall to go around there. The majority of the rainfall falling in the next kind of 20 to 24 hours will be a little bit further inland. We'll be seeing plenty of falls out here just from the thunderstorms later on this afternoon and evening around the Emerald area, and then further towards the coastline by early tomorrow morning. The real rainfall is going to pipe up there, and I would be surprised if we weren't looking at rainfall accumulations over a 6-hour period of around 100mm. If we pulled this forecast out to include the weekend as well, so this is basically a 5-day forecast in terms of rainfall, you can see the peak accumulations are in excess of 200mm outside of Mackay and West Hill. Mackay expecting about 130 to 140mm, Gargett and Yalbaroo between 100 and 130mm apiece. Further north up towards Collinsville, or outside of Collinsville and some of the mountains adjacent to Collinsville, rainfall accumulations up towards 130mm there, and then Ayr and Bowen and along the coastline down towards Proserpine and Hamilton Island, some great rainfall accumulations between 80 and 150mm are expected there, just depending on what showers get themselves streaming ashore, because how this weather event is going to play out is it's going to be lines of moderate to heavy rainfall streaming ashore is going to be a big factor in terms of how much rainfall is going to fall into this part of Queensland. The heaviest falls should be around the Ogmore and Yeppoon area, at least further north of Yeppoon and Rockhampton. The heavy falls are going to be here around that sort of that 2 to 250mm mark. Plenty of rainfall expected to go around up here. Thankfully, this is a pretty isolated corner of Queensland in terms of population. People don't really live in this part of Queensland. It's just going to be a couple of farms and a couple of kind of homesteading blocks out here that get the worst of the rainfall, but still there is going to be plenty of the stuff to go around, and over a short period of time it could cause some flash flooding and even riverine flooding problems as well. And considering the fact that this is a low pressure system as well, and it does have tropical characteristics, and it isn't going to be a weak low pressure system either. I mean, I am expecting this low pressure system kind of bottom out at around kind of 998 millibars or 1,000 millibars or so. There will also likely be a bit of a storm tide with this, so higher tides than expected, or higher tides than normal, expected on Thursday and Friday, just with the association of this low pressure system here, the winds and the waves driving ashore. I'm not saying a full-blown storm tide is expected, but certainly expect some coastal flooding if you do live very close to the coast, or you are below sea level and quite close to the coast once again. Be interesting to see how this weather event does play out. Plenty of rainfall on the cards here, and you can see from the rainfall it's expected to continue into next week. I mean, it really doesn't stop now until about Christmas time. Rainfall accumulations are going to be in excess of 350mm across this part of Queensland, and then further north the rainfall really does pipe up, and prefacing the far northern Queensland forecast, over 600mm now in the forecast around Ingham and Cardwell. Plenty of stuff expected, so let's dive into that part of the forecast right now before we talk about the more general thunderstorm forecast across the north of Queensland. So again, far northern Queensland not really expecting any rainfall from this weather event that's going to be impacting central Queensland. Townsville could still get a very good helping of rainfall early tomorrow morning and then into the afternoon hours from thunderstorms streaming ashore and blowing up in the general area around Townsville, and also further inland out towards Charters Towers, some good falls also possible. The rainfall really being quite continuous and quite persistent around Townsville as well Thursday night, and I would be surprised if Townsville didn't pick up 100mm or so to the 9 a.m. on Friday morning in a 48-hour period. Certainly some great rainfall is expected there. Rainfall should ease off by around lunchtime on Friday, and you can see it more or less clears out of Townsville for a good couple of days. Plenty of falls and storms also expected across the north of Queensland as well, between Thursday and Friday. Again, I'd be surprised if, just depending on how the coastal flow works, Thursday night into Friday morning, 50 or 80 millimetres didn't fall around the Innisfail and Tully area. I'd be very surprised if that didn't happen. Cairns, I'd say, could probably get about 10 millimetres out in the Atherton Tablelands. So there's not going to be too much in the way of rainfall, but still some lucky people under the right thunderstorms could get between 10 and 20 millimetres of rainfall. And thunderstorms will be quite widespread throughout Friday, especially into the southern extremities of the Atherton Tablelands and further inland from Ingham and Cardwell. There's going to be plenty of storms to talk about on Friday. Again, from thunderstorms, the forecast is going to be very hit and miss, so take that with a heavy pinch of salt. And then beyond Friday, looking into Saturday and Sunday, the rainfall is going to be pretty scattered and pretty hit and miss along the coastline of far northern Queensland. But the real rainfall once again pipes up from a bit of a low pressure system expected to materialise somewhere around the 18th to the 19th of December, just offshore from the far north Queensland kind of coastline. So in a week's time, we will likely see a bit more rainfall pipe up there, and it is also reciprocated between other forecast models as well. So an onshore flow is expected to wrap out the end of next week from Wednesday, Thursday and Friday, and as such those rainfall accumulations do have a good chance of kind of ballooning across the far north of Queensland. Now 600 millimetres is still a lot of rainfall, even for far north Queensland over a 14-day period. That is plenty of rainfall to go around. You're going to be talking about accumulations of 50 millimetres a day for 2 weeks straight, and heavier accumulations as well on days that you are expecting a lot of rain. So the rainfall accumulations here I would right now take with a pretty heavy pinch of salt, and especially considering the forecast is still a little bit uncertain for the time frame after the 16th or the 17th of December, I would again take this with a very heavy pinch of salt. But in terms of the chance of some good rainfall to round out December, it certainly looks quite good now across far northern Queensland. You can see accumulations around Ingham and Cardwell in excess of 500 millimetres, Tully about 300, Innisfail slightly lower at about 250, and then further inland about 350 out there. Atherton Tablelands, Mareeba, Ravenshoe, all of those areas expect at least 150 millimetres of rainfall. In fact, the driest location that I can find would probably be out to about Mount Carbine with 120 millimetres. Cairns expecting about 170 millimetres. Again, coastal location, depending on how this rainfall fires up here, looks like they could be in for a good drenching as well. And it's not just the coastline around far northern Queensland, it's further inland as well, just from showers and thunderstorms being persistent over the next 14 days north of Hughenden and then out south of Forsyth. You can see accumulations around that 400 to 450 millimetre mark. Now that is very bullish for this part of Queensland, and I would take that with a very heavy pinch of salt. In fact, I probably wouldn't take that forecast at face value at all. I'd kind of want to crack into a bit more detail there, but we'd run out of time in this video if I did that in this forecast update. So I'll give a detailed forecast update across the Cape York Peninsula in tomorrow morning's forecast, but you can see just in terms of rainfall over the next 14 days, it does look pretty healthy, just from thunderstorms expected to blow up here and there pretty much every afternoon and evening. I mean, they do it today, tomorrow night, and also Friday night into the southern extremities of the Cape York Peninsula, and then Saturday and Sunday look to be more kind of a Cape York Peninsula kind of thunderstorm breakout, and then later on into next week, it's just going to be plenty of rainfall across interior parts of Queensland based off the Eastern Weather forecast here. Just a big band of tropical moisture is expected to materialise across the northern parts of Queensland and then into the Northern Territory. Is it reciprocated between the other forecast models? No, not really, or not in the dramatic fashion that the Eastern Weather is expecting, and that's why I'm still very kind of uncertain with this forecast here, but it is entirely possible, and you could treat this as a little bit of a warning for some kind of very intense tropical rainfall across the north of Queensland at some time into the later parts of next week, and then as we approach Christmas time. Anyways, the tropical Queensland forecast has ran for long enough. We will revisit it at the end of the video as well for a bit of a tropical low update, so stick around for that. But let's head over into the southwest of Western Australia now. It's going to be a scorcher across Perth today, expecting a top up to 40 degrees Celsius, and into the hills could be a little bit warmer than that. It's already starting to warm up as well around the Perth area. In fact, I'm sweating making this video. It is going to be a warm one indeed. So 40 degrees by midday by the looks of things for Perth. Northern suburbs could tickle about 42, maybe even a little bit warmer than that. The Bureau of Meteorology is also highlighting the chance and the potential of some severe thunderstorms around the Perth metro area into the northern suburbs later on this afternoon and evening. And taking a look at this forecast here, I'm really doubtful for it. In fact, I know there is a bit of rainfall on this forecast here, but these thunderstorms, they are not severe at all. And this is the Axis G3 forecast, or the convective forecast model, which has a big bias for these kind of very low-end thunderstorms. And as such, I wouldn't call anything without kind of a purple splotch, which are located further north of about Geraldton and Northampton as a thunderstorm at least, or a normal thunderstorm on the forecast. And you can see between the Eastern Weather forecast model, the GFS forecast model as well, and the Axis, or the main Axis forecast model, there really isn't anything in the way of significant thunderstorms or rainfall at all pretty much into the Perth metro area. So I'd take that forecast with a very heavy pinch of salt. I don't think severe thunderstorms are going to materialise. They are a chance into the northern parts of the wheat belt and also directly north of Perth around kind of the Gin area. Wouldn't be surprised if if one or two fired up there, but into the hills or the northern suburbs or anywhere around the Perth metro area, I highly doubt it. I'm giving it a very low chance of happening at all. Tomorrow's going to be a little bit cooler for the Perth metro area, about 36 or 37. It's going to be a bit warmer, it feels like it's going to be a bit warmer. The humidity will be building, especially from the mid-afternoon hours into the Perth metro area, just from that sea breeze that's expected to come through, so it's going to be very muggy indeed. And then Friday is just going to be hell. It looks like it's going to be 34 in Perth, but just from the coastal flow, there's westerly winds here. I believe the humidity values are going to be through the roof around the Perth metro area. I mean, you can see here humidity values at that 34, 35 degree mark and humidity values of 50%, so it's going to be very warm indeed, awfully uncomfortable. And even further inland out towards Corrigin and Hyde, and humidity values on a 40-degree day are typically into the single digits, but they're around 20%, and that doesn't sound like a big difference here, but the heat index is going to be much higher than usual, so it's going to be a muggy day on Friday, quite an uncomfortable one, that's for sure. The temperatures do ease off on Saturday. They do draw further inland on Saturday as well, but the temperatures do, for the most part, especially along the coastal regions, do ease off. You can see a maximum of 26 expected for Perth, again very humid, and then further inland up to about 35, 36, 37 into the Wheatbelt area. I'd also like to say on Friday afternoon there is a chance of some great thunderstorms into the central parts of the Wheatbelt. It's going to be a very interesting one indeed to see how they materialise, but it looks like there's going to be some great storms out there, which will be very interesting to see indeed. We can't wait to see what thunderstorms do blow up. There's certainly the chance of some severe ones, that's for sure. Anyways, that will do it for the southwest of Western Australia. We've got tropical lows now to talk about, and I'm going to be very disappointing and just say there's none that are going to form into a tropical cyclone. Well, let's break that down into a bit of greater detail at this time. You can see tropical low 02U still offshore from Western Australia here. In fact, it's looking pretty healthy in terms of how it's developed over the past 12 hours, and you can see just in terms of the satellite loop over the past 1 hour, it is beginning to kind of resemble a tropical cyclone, at least in some fashion, but the convection or the thunderstorm activity is pretty much completely displaced from the tropical system's centre, and as such it is really struggling with the wind shear at this time. It's really combating some high levels of wind shear, and it's not expected to develop into a tropical cyclone pretty much at all. And with the strongest winds at Grande Island being around 30 kilometres an hour out of the east, it really isn't packing a punch either for Western Australia. Some good falls, however, overnight around the interior parts of the Pilbara. Rainfall accumulations of at least 50 or 60 millimetres, and more showers and storms currently on the way and blowing up around the Marble Bar and Newman sort of area. These thunderstorms here certainly have packed a punch overnight, and the rainfall has been very welcome indeed. But in terms of this system packing a punch for Western Australia from cyclonic impacts, I mean, there's not only zero chance of it happening, but it really hasn't in its lifetime either. This system will continue to weaken very slowly throughout the course of today before steadily and more rapidly weakening tomorrow, dying off by tomorrow night. You can see basically remaining a remnant low through Thursday, Friday, and Saturday before completely carking it on Sunday. And then looking further off into the future, with the Bureau of Meteorology given a 30% chance of a tropical cyclone forming sometime in the next 14 days offshore from Western Australia here, but they're calling for this system to develop sometime later this weekend and into Monday and Tuesday. But there's absolutely squat on the forecast for that time period, and even the GFS, which was really fond of this system yesterday, calling for a category 3 or 4 strength tropical cyclone, 2 or 3 strength tropical cyclone, I believe, rather. You can see the GFS also calling for absolutely nothing on the forecast. This is an interesting aspect of the forecast this time, with the Bureau of Meteorology still expecting these systems to develop up in dramatic fashion, and the Axis G3, which is the Bureau of Meteorology's own forecast model, also calling for nothing. Now, I did say yesterday that this tropical cyclone is very unlikely to form, and the forecast models are also not going to pick up on it until they can find out what sort of convection is going to blow up around the system's developing tropical low. But considering there is no tropical low and the chances of this system are dying, I reckon the chance of another tropical cyclone or a tropical low even offshore from Western Australia in the lead up to Christmas is now very low indeed. That's not to say Australia's not going to see a tropical low, though. We are certainly still going to be watching the Gulf of Carpentaria and the Timor Sea. There's certainly some interesting stuff happening there. Now, the tropical low that's expected to move across into Western Australia, or was expected to move across into the West Australian waters by the GFS forecast model, it's expected to kind of hold itself and stagnate itself north of Arnhem Land in the Northern Territory. And you can see what I mean here. It kind of begins to wrap itself up, at least on the Eastern Weather forecast, later on into the forecast period as it kind of gets dragged into the Gulf of Carpentaria. And it looks like we will head into a bit more of an active phase in terms of tropical low activity towards the end of December and into the first couple of weeks of the New Year period. But in terms of making a proper forecast this time for tropical cyclone activity, I mean, I'm giving the entire coastline of Australia a 0% chance of tropical cyclone impacts before Christmas. It's just not going to happen. And I struggle to find why the Bureau of Meteorology is still calling for that 25% chance of not only the tropical cyclone developing offshore from Western Australia right now, but also the tropical cyclone systems that are expected to develop sometime into the early parts of next week. I just think that those chances are way too bullish at this time, especially considering there's no forecast model that's suggesting it whatsoever. The Bureau of Meteorology's own forecast model, though, does suggest that little system spinning up in the Gulf of Carpentaria towards Thursday or Friday, the 19th and 20th of December, respectively, and as such, the Bureau of Meteorology has put a tropical cyclone genesis chance of 15% into the Coral Sea, and onto the Coral Sea into the Gulf of Carpentaria towards Christmas time. That's a valid part of the forecast, because the forecast is still going to be very uncertain here, and the Axis G3 also does a pretty good job at initializing systems that do actually come onto the radar from 10 days out, so I'm not going to knock the Axis G3's forecast here, but again, certainly nothing expected in the next week or so, that's for sure, in terms of cyclones in the Australian waters. The Axis G3, however, is certainly going to be a forecast model that's worth watching, especially into the Gulf of Carpentaria. The Axis G3, like I said, can be very accurate in the 10-day forecast period for tropical cyclones, but it can also be very unreliable, and we've seen it time and time again, the Axis G3 completely boogieing up forecasts. But it did also nail, and credit where credit is due, it did also nail a couple of systems in the 2022-23 season, and I think it also nailed Cyclone Jasper in the 23 and 24 system, so it's certainly a forecast model that I would use for a cyclone forecast, but certainly one that I would use as more sort of a last resort. But yeah, in terms of weather around Australia, certainly feeling very tropical as well, and I imagine it feels very tropical across the north. Just before I finish this video off, I would just like to say that the reason why the titles are structured in the way they are, it's not as clickbait. I'm certainly not trying to create a clickbaity channel or a kind of a bit of a sellout channel. Certainly got to make the titles attractive so people can find the weather forecast, but it's because of the character limits. I only get a certain amount of characters in the YouTube titles, and I'm already pushing it. Same deal with tagging, and same deal with the description as well. But if you've got any feedback, or you'd like your suggestion to be heard, then please do let me know in the comment section down below. I'm always open for feedback, and I love it when people give me detailed feedback on these videos. It really is appreciated, and I do try to take every little piece of advice that I can on board. So again, thank you so much to everyone that's leaving positive comments and nice reviews, and also the feedback as well. It really does help out this network. A special shout out to the channel sponsors. Their names are on screen right now. Again, I could not run the show without them, so again, their support is much appreciated. But that is all from me today. Thank you so much for watching the video to this point. The support has been much appreciated, and I will catch you all in the next storm. Goodbye.